Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel. In chapter 44, we delve into the concept of tolerance in the context of G-Waves theory. Specifically, we explore why subjects become tolerant to positive or negative feedback after repeated exposure. Let's start with an example. In an authoritarian state, if the leader of a government unit is accustomed to employees bullying and flattering, it, they may come to see this behavior as the norm. If an employee, let's call them employee A, speaks to the leader in a respectful but not subservient manner, the leader might perceive employee A as having low emotional intelligence or not understanding the rules. Consequently, the leader might instinctively overlook employee A in benefit distributions. In this example, the leader's tolerance manifests as the belief that employees should know the rules. How can we analyze this situation? We can consider the employee's words to the leader as environmental feedback. Using the principle of combinability in characteristic structure analysis, we can break down this environmental feedback into general feedback about the content of the speech and the positive feedback about the know the rules attitude. Employee A's words, however, only contain general feedback about about the content of the speech, lacking the positive feedback about the know the rules attitude. In other words, other employees' words include positive feedback that flatters the leader. Comparing this to Pavlov's dog experiment, if a bell and food appear simultaneously, it's like general feedback and part of positive feedback appearing together. If only the bell rings without food, it's like employee A speaking to the leader with only general feedback present. By analyzing the dog's reaction, we can draw parallels to understand the leader's tolerance. When the bell and food repeatedly appear together, a stable G connection forms between the bell G and the food G in the dog's brain. Similarly, when employees consistently speak to the leader with a know the rules attitude, a G connection a G connection forms between the subordinate speech G and the humble attitude G in the leader's brain. Note that this humble attitude G is connected to a sub-G of the leader's pleasure-seeking G that can produce pleasure. When employees speak to the leader, this series of G connections activates this sub-G in the leader's brain, generating pleasure just as a dog's food G activation leads to the activation of a sub-G of its pleasure-seeking G, producing pleasure when it encounters certain food. Typically, if a dog hasn't encountered a favorite food for a long time and then does, similar to a leader's first experiencing employees' humble attitudes when taking office, it's like the first activation of a sub-G of the pleasure-seeking G. The first activation is often strong, causing the dog to be ecstatic, ecstatic and the leaders to be delighted. As the dog repeatedly encounters the food and the leaders repeatedly experience employees' humble attitudes, the subject that produces pleasure is activated repeatedly. If the activation frequency is high enough, the G energy of this sub-G will rapidly deplete in the short term, leading to vague activation or no activation in subsequent positive environmental feedback. In this case, the food G or humble attitude G will no longer cause strong activation of the pleasure-producing sub-G. Instead, due to the activation of the other Gs in the brain, simultaneous activation effects may occur, leading the dog or leader to experience other emotions and reshape their response patterns. Therefore, dogs can get tired of certain foods, and leaders can get tired of flattery. Here's a question. If a G is repeatedly activated, according to our G theory, this should be a process of continuous strengthening. Why does this sub-G become less easily activated? This is not contradictory. Contradictory. Repeated activation makes a G more stable, provided it is activated. If G energy depletes due to repeated activation, the emergence of other reshaping is natural. However, before the G energy depletes, the juice is inevitably strengthened. Therefore, when desensitizing a patient with phobia, it's crucial to ensure that the exposure lasts long enough to deplete the G energy of the activated fear G. An important sign is the gradual disappearance of fear, making it easier to achieve the desired reshaping. Otherwise, it might backfire. When fear is activated, it manifests as fear of the feared object, while a pleasure G manifests as a desire for the pleasurable object. Although the effects of these two G's are opposite, the principles are the same. For fear, the smaller the dose or intensity of the feared object, the less fear it includes. For pleasure, the larger the dose or intensity of the pleasurable object, the more pleasure it includes. However, repeated exposure to large doses or in- intensities, intensities of feared or pleasurable objects will inevitably lead to strong activation and significant reshaping of the corresponding fear or pleasure G. The degree of reshaping matches the corresponding dose or intensity, referring to the properties of characteristic structures and similar activations discussed earlier. After significant reshaping, the fear and pleasure G's are less likely to be strongly activated when encountering smaller doses of feared or pleasurable objects. Therefore, therefore, Drinking alcohol can be exciting, and the more excited one gets, the more they drink, gradually becoming tolerant to alcohol, failing later after one or two drinks. Understanding this principle helps explain why desensitization is effective and why leaders come to see employees know the rules attitude as a matter of course. There are countless examples in reality, such as why a goddess might only respond with a causal when you praise her beauty, or why you might feel like you are getting the cold shoulder even when you are being polite to a government official. The corresponding pleasure G has undergone significant reshaping, and small doses of pleasurable objects are less likely to have an effect. Okay, everybody, that's all the content today. Some context are made are made in China. See you next time. Bye bye.